Okay, cool. So I might get started. So I know probably half the faces that have joined the group. So the presentation today is on how to train for a 70.3. In particular, I'll talk about Western Sydney 70.3 because that's what everyone here is probably looking forward to or is entered in and realize that they've got to figure out how to train and prepare for it. I'll make the assumption that most people are doing it for their first time. I haven't got a huge amount of experience. So we're sort of coming from that angle and how to get through these events successfully for a first timer. I don't mind if people ask questions. If anyone's got any sort of specific questions they want, either just jump on the chat, turn your microphone on and ask the question, or just, I think there is a little chat function you can press to ask questions as well, but hopefully I see it when we go through. So is there anything particularly anyone wants me to cover tonight that before the session even starts? Otherwise, I'll start going straight into it. Oops, sorry, I can't hear you very well. Can you just grab your microphone a bit closer? All right, I'll wait. Maybe pop it in the chat. There's a little chat box down the bottom right-hand side. You should be able to pop in a question in through there. Okay. All right. So first thing we're going to be talking about. So before we even talk about how to actually train for the events, I want to go over just some basic concepts for the event. So if it's your first time, the reason you do these events is they're hard. Right. So at no point do you in training think, I can do all these easily. I can swim easy, bike easy, run easy. I'm just going to do heaps of training and the event won't be difficult. The event is hard. That's what you've got yourself in for, and that's you need to get your head around when you're doing it. The big things that I'd always say to focus on for the events, particularly if it's your first time, is don't pick goals that are time-based. So don't go, I need to finish under 5 hours or 6 hours or whatever it is to be successful. You always need to focus on doing the process as best you can. All right. So if you go out there with the intention of going, look, I'm going to do the best swim that I can, the best bike that I can, the best run that I can, I'm going to connect those three together, you will get the best time that you deserve. Okay. Then you can walk away and you can go, hey, I think I can do better next year. And you can give it a crack again. But I would always tell people until you've done these events, you don't focus on times or finish lines or anything like that. You focus purely on the process in training to make you the best athlete that you can for race day. And you on race day, you focus on the best process to get you to the finish line as fast as possible. Whatever time you get is the best time that you deserve. Okay. And that's what it is when you go through. Okay. A couple of big tips. When you look at the training for all this, more training is not better. Okay. So there's plenty of people that will think, I've got to do massive amounts of training, or, it's 3 months out. I should be doing basically all the distances in training in the lead up. The reality is that more training is not better. You need to train at the right level for where you're up to at the moment. Okay, you can't be doing 20 hours of training every week in the lead up for 20 weeks straight. It's too much for most people. And if you're a first timer, you can probably do surprisingly fairly little training and get through the events just fine. The key is that you need to do the right amount of training that your body can adapt to. All right. The other thing that I will point out is that the training that you do is the best training for you. So don't always focus too much on what other people are doing. So there's always, it's human nature, I think, to look at others and compare. You might be comparing yourself with a lot of experience. You might be comparing yourself to someone that's got a huge marathon background or running background or biking background. You might be comparing yourself to someone that's massively overtraining. Okay, so other people's training alone is not relevant to what you're doing. Okay, so when you train at the right level for you, which is going to be different to my training level, which is going to be different to Jeff's training level when we go through as well. Okay. All right. Having said that, I think to be successful at these sorts of events, there should be a baseline that you can achieve before you think about doing. Okay. And this is what I generally tell people. So if I'm coaching someone that's, it's 12 weeks out, which I think it roughly is, it might be 8 weeks out now to the event. I say you should be able to swim a kilometre straight. Okay, and whether you can do that in 12 minutes or 30 minutes, that's fine. But you should be able to swim 1K straight. You should be able to ride your bike for an hour and a half. Okay, and for most of you, that's going to be somewhere between 35 and 60 Ks. Okay, so and you should be able to comfortably run 7 to 10 Ks. This is not together. This is all separate. Okay, so I look at that as a good baseline, as a start point to build on. If you don't have that as a baseline, I think you increase the risk of injury chance when you're going out there, or just getting to a point where the event does get quite tough because you don't have enough volume in the past to be able to get through these things. All right. So when it comes to training for endurance sports, I look at it from two standpoints. So there is the muscle side. So, you know, are my muscles strong enough? Can I contract them for long enough to swim, bike, and run all the way through? The other side of it is how do I supply the energy to those muscles to do that? So for those that don't know me particularly well, my background is I have a degree in medical science. I majored in biochemistry. And so you will see that angle come through in a lot of what I do because I understand energy systems very well. I also understand how the body responds at a cellular level to the stimulus that you give it. All right. So when you're looking at these events, most people think, you know, something simple. If I run fast all the time, I'll become a faster runner. Not really true. Okay. True to some extent, but not really true. Okay. You want to have strength in your muscles for lots of reasons. So you can generate more power, so that you're less likely to get injured. So if your muscles are nice and strong, you're going to find that, you know, if you do long runs, they don't have to work as hard as when they're weak. And so things like injury risk goes down. But also when it comes to supplying energy, you need to be able to make sure that you can supply the energy to those muscles to do that job for long periods of time. So, you know, the winning guy on race day at Western Sydney is going to take 3.5 to 4 hours, right? And so that's a long time to be contracting muscles. You need to be able to make sure that you can supply energy for that full period of time when you're out there as well. So whenever I look at stuff from a training perspective, training sessions are either about doing this, improving muscle strength, improving strength endurance, making sure you don't get injured, or they're about improving your body's ability to supply energy to the muscles so that they can do their job. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about when it comes to preparing for an endurance event is not about the muscle stuff. It's people understanding that in order to finish a long distance event properly, you need to be able to supply enough energy to the body to complete the event. All right. So the way I always describe this is the bathtub analogy. Okay. So in this case, the bathtub is the amount of blood sugar or energy you've got in your body easily accessible. Okay. When you start the race, you effectively pull out the plug, okay, and the water starts to go out. You can turn on the tap, which is eating, and you can top up the bath as you go through. You need to finish the race before the bathtub gets empty, all right? So if you race really high intensity, you will burn through more sugar, or in this case, more water will exit the bath, okay, but the tap might not be able to fill it up before it empties, okay? If you slow down the rate that the water exits, okay, you've got more time to get to the finish line. So what I like people to understand is that you have a finite amount of sugar available in the body, okay? And you need to make sure that you train in a way that spares that sugar, but also you need to learn how to eat properly so that you can top it up during the race. But you need to make sure when you finish the event, you can be the strongest athlete on the planet, but if you don't have the fuel to squeeze the muscles, you'll run out of gas and you'll get to 4 hours in, 5 hours in, 6 hours in, and you'll run out. And that's when you'll be walking towards the finish line as we go through. Does that analogy make sense to everyone, hopefully? I know at least one person here has done Ironman, so he'll probably understand that, what I'm saying there quite well. All right, so when you fuel a long distance event, you basically have two main fuel sources. So you have bodily fat, which everyone here has more than enough bodily fat to fuel days and days and weeks of walking at low intensity. All right, you also have stored sugar, okay? Of which we all have about 90 minutes of high intensity exercise to do that with. So, you know, if you were to go do a sprint distance triathlon, let's say all of us finish in an hour and a half, you know, in theory, we don't need to top up with any sugar during that event. We should have enough strapped to us to do those events, but we're going to run out. If anyone's done an Olympic distance where it's further, they'll realize that you do need to take on some level of gels and bits and pieces to get through, because you will run out, because that 90 minutes will run out when you're out there at high intensity. So when I use the term sugar, the terms carbohydrate, they effectively mean the same thing for what I'm saying today. Your body stores sugar in your bloodstream, your body stores it in the liver, and your body stores it in your muscles. Those are the three places that you can store sugar in the body. As you exercise, as you race, as you train, your body will burn through this as you go through, depending on the intensity of what you do, okay? On a practical basis, your body has heaps of fat strapped all over it, Okay, on the outside, around the organs, on the inside, on a practical basis, you have an endless supply of fat strapped to you. So if you can utilize that when you're training and you're racing, you'll have plenty of energy available when you do everything. All right. I'm going to explain how your body burns fuel, and then I'm going to relate that to how training zones work, okay, and how heart rate training zones work. So to simplify it, you've basically got simple graph. As the heart rate goes up, the amount of sugar you burn goes up. Okay, so as your heart rate is down low, so if you're out there and you're doing a walk with dog, heart rate stays low, you're going to find your body does not burn through much sugar, and it will choose to use bodily fat. Okay, as your heart rate goes up, the exercise intensity goes up, your body will choose to use bodily sugar. Okay, because it's easier to access when you go through. The same is true when you lower the intensity. So as the intensity goes down, your body will shift to using more and more fat as you go through. So a simple thing to remember is, for people that have a weight loss goal, the best thing to do is go out walking. Okay, one of, I would say, the poorer decisions to do is to go out and do really high intensity exercise, because it's not pulling from the right fuel source when you do it. Okay, so the irony is that people want to lose weight. They probably should go out walking the dog and eating a sensible diet. They don't need to do really high intensity work. It's probably not going to be as effective as doing low intensity work as they go through. Okay, so I'm going to use two terms when I discuss training zones, because that's going to be relevant to when I'm teaching you how to actually train for these events. So when you're training for an endurance event, you must get good at burning bodily fat. Okay, bodily fat, or burning bodily fat, is called aerobic training. All right, so aerobic means that you will breathe in oxygen, you will combine that with bodily fat, you'll burn it up, and your body will breathe out carbon dioxide. That's your byproduct. Okay, so very simple mechanism for it to happen, but you've got an endless amount of fat strapped to you, you have an endless amount of oxygen available to you. That is the most efficient way to train. It's the most efficient way to race. If you go up in intensity, so you decide, hey, I'm going to run really hard at the end of the half Ironman, your body will burn more sugar. Okay, in the process of burning more sugar, you will create lactic acid as a byproduct. Okay, so lactic acid has a negative effect. One, you have a limited amount of sugar available, but when you create lactic acid, that's the burning sensation that you get, and it will slow you down, because you'll only be able to go as quickly as your body can clear the lactic acid out of your system. All right, so when it comes to training, when you train easy, it does a couple of things. So, and when I say easy, I don't mean slow, I mean easy. So low intensity, low heart rate. When you train easy, your body is learning to take fat from your fat cells. It's learning it to combine it with oxygen and turning that into the energy molecule that you guys use to squeeze muscles. When you train at really high intensities, your body learns that, hey, we should grab just the sugar that we've got available because it's faster to get access to, but we should produce lactic acid as a byproduct. And your body will get good at clearing out lactic acid, but you've got a limited supply of what you do, okay? So when you train easy, your body gets better at burning fat. When you train high intensity, your body gets better at burning sugar, right? But when you train at low intensities and your body gets really good at burning fat, okay, and therefore producing the energy molecule that it needs to squeeze muscles, when you get good at that, you're able to go harder and faster before your body switches into the next metabolism mode. Right? So the biggest mistake that I see people make is they train too hard. Okay, everyone who does triathlon is normally quite a motivated person, because you're all decided to pick 3 sports to be good at the same time, right? But when you do it, you need to understand that when some of the sessions that you do need to be actually really quite easy. So going for a run, listening to a podcast, listening to music, being able to chat to the person next to you, you don't care about your speed whatsoever. It's irrelevant, okay? But then on the other side of the coin is when you're training hard, and that might be doing a really difficult indoor 1-hour session, or doing a track running session, or really high intensity swim. Those sessions are hard, all right? And they're to develop your muscular strength and to develop your anaerobic system. But it's the combination of both of those together that bring you performance. So anyone that I've coached over the years will hear me say this phrase a lot, which is hard is hard and easy is easy, right? So when you train hard, my expectations are that you will train pretty hard. So you're going to get towards the end of those sessions and you'll be very thankful that they're over. But when you train easy, you need to train really easy. So you need to go out. It doesn't matter if you're running at 7-minute K pace. It's fine. All right. Because we're not training the muscles on those sessions. We're training your biochemistry to supply energy to the muscles to do their job. And the better we are at doing that, the faster we can go before your body will kick up into the energy system that will burn sugar. Okay. Does anyone have any questions on that? No? Good. All right. So there's a couple of limiting factors for human performance. One is how much energy you can deliver to the muscles, okay? And the other one is how much oxygen you can deliver, okay? So if you're burning fat, you need to be able to deliver as much oxygen as you can. The more oxygen you can deliver, the more energy molecule you can make with fat, okay? Those are the limiting factors of human performance. And so if you learn that, you'll discover that learning to ride easy and run easy will make you a faster athlete. As counterintuitive as that said, the best analogy I can probably give is it will turn a 4-cylinder car into an 8-cylinder car. All right. So when you do want to put your foot down, you are better able to supply the fuel to be able to go faster when you're there. Okay. So a big thing for me is athletes understanding that when they train, it is not just about the muscles. Okay. That's only part of the story. The other big part of the story is how do I supply the fuel to those muscles to do their job? And so a big chunk of that is how you train. And the other side of that is how you eat. Okay. But how you're training and training easy is probably the biggest thing that I can give you. So if you guys think about your event, most of you on here are first timers. So I'm going to assume most of you are going to take over 5 hours to finish the event. 5-hour events are aerobic events. Okay. So you must be really, really good at burning fat as a fuel source and being able to keep your heart rate down. When you're out there, if your heart rate goes too high, it won't work. All right. So the next thing I'm going to touch on is energy zones. Okay. And I'm going to keep this fairly simple, but it's a big one to understand because you need to understand where most of your training must be in terms of intensity. Okay. So to keep things nice and simple, this is the heart rate going up. Okay. And this is just time down the bottom. Okay. As you're training, the vast majority of your training for all of you should be aiming to keep your heart rate in this zone 2 area down here. So if I were to give it the 80-20 rule, I would say 80% of your training volume on a weekly basis should be aimed at keeping your heart rate low. So in these sessions, you do not care about your running pace. You don't care about your biking power. You don't care about your swimming speed. All you care about is that your heart rate is staying down and your body is learning to supply energy in that zone as we go through. Then when you're doing your hard training sessions, they're going to be up here, okay? But that's going to be 20% of the time. So that might only be a total of 2 to 3 hours a week max, okay? And that might be, a really hard bike set and, you start your heart rate here and it goes up here and then you're just hanging on for dear life. When you go through, same, it might be you go out and do an easy run and then the end of your run, you've got some big hard 10-minute effort at the end. Okay, and heart rate's going to come up to here. But when you come up higher to here, you're going to switch fuel sources. So your goal is the vast majority of your training must be down here. Okay, if you go out there with this goal of thinking, I want to average 30 Ks an hour for the bike leg. So every time you go out, you just go straight up here. Okay, it won't work. Okay, it doesn't matter how mentally tough you are, it won't work. You need to train down here, get comfortable there and do the hard training sessions, and eventually you'll find that your zone 2 does get up to the higher power levels or the higher associated speed levels when you're out there as well. So I'm just going to show what that looks like on a real world training session. So this is someone out going for a long distance run. I think this run is 90 minutes or so long. So this is their heart rate that you can see in through here. This is their zone or 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. You can see each of the bands. Okay. So this person's goal when they go out, they've done their little walk warm up, they've done a bit of a slight jog to get started. And then their goal is to keep their heart rate sitting in this zone 2 band for the entire session. Okay. So for me as a coach, I don't care at all what speed is being done here. All I care about is that the athlete kept their heart rate in that zone. That's perfect. I know that they've done that exactly as planned. And they've trained their biochemistry ready to get ready for something like a half Ironman. In comparison, this one's a little bit harder to see because you can see the red line goes up towards this dotted line. This dotted line is their lactate threshold. It's the point at which it's the heart rate at which they create lactic acid and can still clear it out. So for most people, that would be described as the red line, running 5Ks as hard as you can at park run, and you find that your heart rate hovers around a couple of beats because that's where your body can tolerate what you're doing. Any higher, you have to slow down after a little bit when you go through. So in comparison, this is someone doing a hard event where they come up, and you'll find that it more or less sits on through here. So you can do this for a little while, okay? But you're going to find in a really well-trained athlete, you can do that for maybe 90 minutes, okay? For park runs, things like that, any extended period of time, you'll find that you cannot go beyond this dotted line on a biochemistry basis. So you can't out-tough physiology. It's not possible. You can't mentally beat results. The body will tell you and dictate what's going to happen. But that is an example of someone doing a hard training session. Okay, so I'll go back. This is what the vast majority of everyone here training should look like. So keeping their heart rate down nice and low, and you should have very sparing amounts of coming up and doing this really high intensity stuff. The other reason I say that is because the really high intensity stuff takes a longer recovery time, and there's generally a higher injury risk as well. So if you're up here and you feel with lactic acid, you wake up the next day, muscles are really sore because you've cleared out lactic acid. They've had to contract a lot harder, so you've done a bit more damage to the cells and the muscles. Whereas if you learn to do this sort of stuff, you'll find that you can get up the next day and you can train again. All right. So if you're training at this high intensity all the time, you're going to find injury risk goes up, recovery time goes down. Generally, you just feel tired. The other thing you'll find is after these really hard training sessions is you'll probably crave things like sugary food as well, because your body's trying to replenish its stores. Okay. So understanding training zones, right? So your body will adapt to the stimulus that you give it. So same as you stand out in the sun, you'll get a tan. Your body will respond to the stimulus that's provided, and it will do things to get better at it. So if you go out there and you do lots of zone 2 training, so you go out there and run aerobically, your body will go, oh, let's get better at taking this person's bodily fat and burning it for a fuel, because he seems to do this all the time, okay? When you get good at doing that, you can turn your 4-cylinder car into an 8, because you can burn more fat per hour, which means that you can create more energy for your cells per hour. So you can start going faster before your body kicks up into the next energy system. All right, learn to train in low heart rate zones. So for some of you, that might mean putting your ego down sometimes. And so what I mean by that is you might go out for a run and your heart rate just slowly rises and you don't want to stop running. But maybe you should just have a 30-second walk. Maybe every time you get to a hill, you need to come down. So I've got a question. What if you've done 90 to 100% zone 2 for an extended period? Should you come back to 80-20? Sorry, do you mean extended period as done 80 zone 2 for should you come back? I don't quite understand the question. You mean 90 to 100% zone 2? Do you mean you've done that for months and months and months?
Yeah, a few months.
Yeah, so I would say, if you go look at, say the top Kenyans that win the Olympics, they're out there doing their zone 2 runs at like 7-minute K pace, right? And those guys can race at under 3 minutes per kilometer, right? So, but the bulk of their running is done at this really low intensity stuff. Yes, they do really hard stuff as well, but I don't think people realize how much time they actually spend doing down. It's probably a question that I'll answer a bit more towards the end, but I don't have an issue with someone doing like majority of zone 2 training, particularly if they're complementing that with some weights and stuff like that. But there's definitely times in your training that's a really good thing to do. So, but having said that, when you're getting closer to the event and you're shifting towards the performance side of what you're doing, you are not going to sit all the time in zone 2. You're going to sit a little bit higher, probably in a zone 3 or just upper zone 2 where it gets to a tempo point as well. So I think in regards to your question, it depends in what point of your training you are. So, you're 16 weeks out, 90 to 100% zone 2 makes sense. If you're, 4 weeks out and you're doing specific race prep, your bike ride is not going to be zone 2. It's probably going to be lower zone 3. It's going to be higher because you're finding this line between, burning fat and sugar as well as what your body can take. So obviously if you're going faster on the bike, you finish the event quicker. And so you're running this bathtub analogy where you've got to find that sweet spot for all of it, but you're going to find that definitely, your quality sessions are not going to be keeping your heart rate too low. If you're in the more competitive end of the event, if you're just trying to finish an event under 8 hours, I would say, yeah, you have to go sort of zone 2. Can you go too easy? Does aerobic. Louise, I know so for those that don't know Louise does ultra running of stupid long distances of over 100K. No, I don't think you can go too easy. So if you're, say, doing trail running and stuff like that, I would say the endurance side of keeping your heart rate down is a really, really good thing. What I would say though is if you're talking about doing, really long trail runs to complement, the only thing I would say is from a training stimulus, the running style for ultra running is probably not as good a stimulus as, say, road running in preparation for Western Sydney. And I say that as someone who really enjoys trail running. But you do shorten your stride up a lot, and so you will become very economical at that, but it's probably not the greatest stride length. And so I'd probably say, maybe do outdoor running on more road type surfaces. So that could be trail running, but just not technical trail running. And that would, if you're running a bit quicker, your heart rate will lift up into zone 2 as well. All right, is there any other questions? No? All right. So to answer, I guess, Jay Osmo, what's your first name, mate?
Justin.
Justin. So to answer your question in regards to, when should you be doing, zone 2 versus harder efforts, the general structure would be something like this. Okay. So you would sort of break this into a few phases. So phase 1 would be, about 4 months out, and that's where you would be doing probably almost 100% aerobic training. But I would be saying you should be spending the rest of the time in the gym. Okay, so your gym training is not going to be, zone 2 training because you're going to be lifting weights. But having said that, 30 seconds of weights is not really talking about energy systems. You're just lifting heavy stuff. But in this phase here, you're not worried at all about, performance. You're just trying to set the platform to perform later down the track. So here you are developing your biochemistry system. Here you are improving your outright strength, and you're reducing your likelihood of injury before you go into the next phases. In the next phase, you're going to keep a lot of your aerobic training up, but you'll probably shift your gym work to being endurance strength training. So that might be, instead of doing lots of gym works and lifting weights, you might get on the bike and start doing things like low cadence work on the bike, or doing, going to your local bobbin head climb and going up and down the hill lots of times to get endurance strength for longer periods of times. When you then shift into the next phase, it's when you'll start bringing into quality effort. So that might be when you start doing some track running stuff. You might go out and do your aerobic run, but at the end, you've got a couple of higher intensity efforts there where you're trying to build some explosive leg strength at the same time as maintaining your biochemistry of your aerobic training. So you'll see aerobic appears in every stage. All right. And the last stage is when you're specific race prep. So you've got to a certain point, you want to get technical and you sort of know, look, my 10K run time is about this. My bike threshold power is about this. You can mathematically work out what power you should be holding. You can mathematically work out what run pace you should be holding as well. And that's where you go into the gray areas where you're not sitting in zone 2 all the time for your quality stuff. You're probably sitting in zone 3. But you should have it paced out so that it's done at a pace that you think you can hold for the entire half Ironman when you're out there. All right, so I'll go through that in a bit more detail. So your first phase of training should always be aerobic training. So going out there, doesn't matter what speed you're going, your goal is just keep your heart rate down when you're out there. That may mean lots of walk breaks. It might mean some trail running where you're keeping your heart rate down. It might mean going out and bunch riding with friends where you're not really putting the hammer down too much. You're just sitting there and keeping your heart rate down with your goal being to rack up kilometers. Okay. These sessions should all be relatively easy. Gym work, I'm always a very big fan of gym work, particularly core strength, to make sure that all your peripheries are nice and stable. So, glutes, abdominals, shoulders, everything to make sure that everything is nice and strong. That comes into play later on when your training volume picks up. If you're nice and strong, your likelihood of injury goes down. Okay. And the other one that's great to do in this time is things like technique. So working on your swim technique, working on your run technique at a time when your performance doesn't matter. So you're not phased about what your swim speed is, but you go in there and you can do lots of technique work, which will also complement, the low intensity, and you can work on being an efficient swimmer or an efficient runner. Okay. While you're keeping your heart rate down. All right. When you move on to the next phase, which is around about 12 weeks out, you're going to shift and you'll still do lots of aerobic training, but that's when you might start to then shift into doing a lot of endurance strength training. Okay, and by endurance strength, instead of going out and going, look, I'm going to do 15 reps of squats, you might get on the bike and start doing, inside trainer on the bike at low cadence. So you're going to do 10-minute blocks of just grinding away and trying to take your overall leg strength and turning that into endurance leg strength. Okay, but having said that, this will probably be difficult for the muscles, but you probably find your heart rate still stays down. Okay, in terms of when you do it. Okay, it's also a good time of doing things like if your shoulders are good, is pull out the pull buoys and the paddles in the water and trying to really build up some strength through your arms in there as well. Okay, for me, a base level of maintaining gym work is always critical. So whether that's going to a Pilates class, whether that's having a little 15-minute core routine that you do just for injury prevention for people long term. It's much easier to make time for 15 minutes a week of some basic exercises than it is to manage an injury once it happens and you can't train properly. All right, the next phase, again, you're about 8 weeks out. So you've got aerobic training. So, you'll still be doing easy runs, easy rides, but you'll be starting to build some quality efforts into what you're doing. So what that might look like is, you getting on the indoor trainer and you've got, 1 hour of structured efforts around your threshold, which is difficult. It might mean going to a track running session. It might mean going to, your hour run and then you run all the way to park run and you do park run to finish off. Okay, so that's when you start combining the aerobic training with your quality efforts or your anaerobic training, because now you're trying to get both energy systems to work in terms of what you're doing. All right, it's also a good time to start testing things like your nutrition plan. So you need to start working out what you can stomach during the race day. And again, always making sure you're doing your gym work. 4 weeks out, you're really getting into the point where you're doing race-specific preparation. So basically, you're going out there on your Saturday and you're practicing exactly what you're going to do on race day. So that's when you go out there and you find out, look, my threshold power on the bike or my threshold heart rate on the bike is this. So I'm going to aim for 75% of that number. And then I'm going to go off the bike and I think I can hold 5-minute K pace, and doing a bunch of efforts and intervals to try to practice that. And you might be doing things like making sure that, you do a 10-minute effort knowing that there's an aid station about every 10 minutes. So you've got a 10-minute effort, you go grab a drink and some gels, and then you go for another 10-minute effort. And so that's when you're really trying to do exactly what you plan to do on race day and see whether it can work. So, when someone said, how hard can you kind of go and when do you shift? You might go to these sessions thinking, I think I can hold these power numbers and this and that. And you go out in training and you discover you can't. Right? So then you can readjust your strategy ready for race day. It's much better to learn that you're going to blow up in training than it is to go out on race day and get it to happen there. The 4 weeks out is also the time of getting yourself organized. So making sure your bike's serviced, all your gear that you need has been used before. Nothing is new for race day. So making sure that you're actually prepared for the actual race. All right. So what does the biggest kind of weeks look like? All right. So your Monday to Friday, for most people training, doesn't really look any different from the first week to the last week. You're not suddenly doubling the swim volume, doubling the bike volume, increasing anything. Mostly what happens is what you're doing on the weekends changes, okay? And what you might do on the weekday sessions changes in terms of structure, but doesn't really change in terms of the amount of time you spend training. So I would sort of say that during the week, for most people, you should be aiming to be training once a day. All right. For most people, that is enough. Okay. So you might go, I'm going to do 3 swims a week and I'm going to do 2 runs a week and I'm going to do 2 bikes a week. Okay. And that would be a nice balanced program. All right. So whenever you talk to people, if you speak to runners, they'll tell you got to run 7 times a week, 6 times a week. If you talk to bike riders, they'll tell you the same. If you talk to swimmers, they'll tell you need to swim twice a day every day. Okay. But triathletes are their own individuals. All right, and you guys need to find a balance to do 3 sports. Okay, so don't get caught up in overdoing it. You don't need to be doing multiple training sessions a day unless you're quite advanced or you're really used to the training load. Training once a day will get really, really good results most of the time. Keeping in mind that you don't get better when you train, you get better when you recover from your training. Okay, so if you do too much training, you don't get better, you just get tired. There's been plenty of athletes over the years that tell me, Dan, I'm not doing enough. I tell them, well, you can make a choice. I can make you tired or I can make you better. All right. So you can pick which one of those that you want. All right. But doing less is, for most people, the better outcome. And that means that when you go out training, you do better quality training when you're there. All right. So a really heavy week might look like 1 training session a day during the week All right, and on the weekend, I generally try to get everyone to effectively do a half Ironman across a 24-hour period. All right, so on Friday afternoon or Friday morning, you might go out and swim a 1.9K swim. On Saturday, you might go out and do a 90K bike ride, roughly, and you might do a 30-minute run off the bike. And the next day, you're going to get up and you're going to finish the rest of the half marathon. Okay, so something like this would be the heaviest week that you've got. You don't need to do anything more than that. You don't need to go run 21Ks, 21.1Ks in training. You definitely don't need to ride 90Ks and then run 21.1Ks in training. I guarantee you that when you get halfway through the half Ironman, you won't lack motivation to finish, okay? And having done more in training will not be any more beneficial for when you get there, okay? Does anyone have any questions about that? No? All right. So injury prevention is always a big one for me. So, whenever I'm coaching people, not getting injured is the best way for me to manage it, because once people get injured, it's always difficult to keep training, as well as, figure out solutions to get them back training properly as quickly as possible. And the first thing I'll say is most training injuries are caused because people have egos. All right. And that will sound like a really negative thing to say. But when I say that, it's people that do more than they should be doing. It's more than their body is ready to do, or they're training too hard than their body is ready for as well. So, if you're going out running and think, I really want to run 5-minute K pace. And so instead of going out and doing your easy zone 2 run, you keep going out there trying to run this pace that your ego says that you need to do, and your body's not ready for it. Okay. And that's when injuries and things pop up. All right. The other ways to prevent injuries are making sure you structure your training from months out. So making sure you do gym work as your base when you go through. And then as you progress, you'll do less gym work, but you'll do a maintenance level of gym work to make sure that your goal is not to get stronger. Your goal is to make sure that your fitness level doesn't go backwards. Your strength level does not go backwards when you're there. Progressing training load slowly. All right. So, you don't want to suddenly go from running 30 minutes up to running 90 minutes in the space of 2 weeks. You want to get there slowly over a couple of weeks and make sure your body's used to what it's actually doing. The same goes for the bike and the run. You don't want to suddenly go double your swim volume or double your run volume across the week. If you run twice a week, don't suddenly start running 4 and running further at the same time. That's when injuries will kind of happen. Adjusting your training to what your body's telling you to do. So, as a coach, I can set a training program for someone. It's all theoretical. But, if you go, hey, I ran yesterday and my Achilles is really sore, my calf's really tight or something like that. Sometimes it's your body just saying, hey, like we can shuffle the training program around, but you can't run on me again today. So just listening to what your body's telling you. Rarely do I ever come across someone doing long distance triathlon that's lazy. None of you guys are lazy. You're all the opposite end, which you're too motivated to do it, and you'll ignore what your body's telling you sometimes. So just learn to listen to your body. Sometimes there's no, magic session. There's no magic week. There's no magic anything. It's consistency over time that brings results, and it's perfectly okay to take a couple of days off, or to take something easy, or to shorten a session rather than push through and then an injury coming to a head rather than having just a couple of extra days to sort of heal. It's always good to remember that, if you do push yourself to injury, you are going to have to take time off, right? So sometimes you're better off to take that time off preemptively and not have to manage with the injury as you go through. Making sure that you have equipment that suits you, okay? So that includes running shoes, bikes that fit you properly, even swimming aids, okay, in terms of technique. So there's lots of cool toys these days you can get, but things like, using your carbon-plated running shoes to do your long runs is not a great idea because they're really unstable. Okay, making sure your bike is set up properly so that you don't injure yourself with repetitive movement when you go through. If you're a swimmer and you don't have great technique or you're not experienced, then maybe don't put the paddles on your hands to really put and load up your shoulders. Maybe just wait until you're a bit more experienced and a bit stronger before you do those things. The other things that you can do, and it's always good to form a team around you, is to make sure you get regular massages. That might be once a month you go get a massage. Foam roller is a great thing to put in front of Netflix at the end of the day and just roll out the tight points, making sure you sleep, okay? It'd be great if all of us got 8 hours sleep a night, which none of us probably do, but sleep is a huge part of the recovery process. So just remember, you don't get better when you train. You're doing damage that your body then responds to. So you need to make sure you get enough sleep. Okay, and there's no shortage of athletes that are happy to train at night, get 6 hours sleep, get up in the morning, go again, go to work, go back to training. But sometimes you need to make sure that you actually take a step back and learn to sleep and rest, because that's when you'll actually get the performance gains. The other thing is eating properly. Okay, don't undereat, don't eat poor quality food. Make sure that you're eating appropriate food for your training. Don't send your body into starvation mode because you're not eating enough when you're doing stuff. And doing little things like if you're sweating a lot, you need to take in electrolytes. Making sure after you train, you take in appropriate protein so that you can actually recover from training sessions as well. All right. In terms of nutrition and hydration, I'm going to touch on this one. So there's a couple of basic guidelines people can use when they train. So as a general rule, if you are going to do a training session, you should aim to eat something 60 minutes or so before your training. And in general, you should aim for some level of carbohydrate. So that might look as simple as having breakfast, having a banana before you train. It doesn't need to be, highly processed sports food. You just need to make sure that you are eating beforehand so that you top up your sugar levels so that you've got a bit more sugar available to burn when you're doing particularly high intensity training. Always aim to eat within 30 minutes of finishing your training session. Okay, so you got to remember that your human body was not designed to do 70.3s. Your human body was designed to hunt stuff and eat it and to run away from things. So if you are training, the best way to recover is to make sure you eat something with protein in it afterwards. Your body will start thinking it's a very successful hunter, and every time you eat, you will recover properly. So that can be as simple as a protein shake afterwards. It can be a full meal. It can be something with meat in it, but you want to make sure that you are eating within 30 minutes. So for a lot of people, if we're training and we're going out to train, getting a protein shake or something is a pretty easy way to kind of make sure that you finish your training session, you get some hydration with the protein shake, and then you have the protein in there for your body to start the repairing as well. All right, if you leave it too long, you got to remember that your body thinks that you're an unsuccessful hunter and you're probably going to not do repair work for the body. The other one is electrolytes. So when you contract muscles, you need sodium, potassium, and magnesium in order for a muscle to contract. When you sweat those electrolytes out or those salts out. You need to replace them. Okay, so everyone is pretty much magnesium deficient, but there are plenty of electrolyte substances on the market that you can take. Go pick whichever one you like the taste of and seems to work for you. But making sure during the daytime that after you train, if you've done a run and you've sweated a couple of liters out, I think the rule of thumb is it takes 2 liters of fluid to replace 1 liter that you sweated out. So it will take you a good chunk of the day of drinking to make sure you've replenished that as well. All right. A couple of things from me. Sugar is fairly inflammatory. So I don't think people should be drinking sports drinks constantly unless you're actually doing long distance stuff and you're burning fuel. So, if you've got a training session that's, a 30-minute bike ride or something like that, you don't need a Gatorade or something to get you through. You should be able to just eat normal food when you're out there. All right. Always test your nutrition in the lead up. So, sorry, I've got a siren going off that side. In that 8-week period before, whatever your nutrition plan is that you want to stick to, make sure you're testing it. So some things you will find will give you an upset stomach when you're out there. It's always good to find out what those things are in training so that you can adjust. And, the nutrition strategy that I stick to and the nutrition strategy that someone else sticks to will differ. Okay, I'm going to enjoy different foods to everyone else. I'm going to find that certain gels sit on my stomach well and others don't. But just make sure that you're finding a nutrition sources that sort of suit you. And I've seen everything from people eating jelly beans for all of Ironman to people having really, just salt and Vegemite sandwiches and homemade protein bars as they're going. Whatever works for you is fine, but just make sure that you test it in training and don't test new stuff on race day, particularly the stuff that you get from the expo the day before. All right. So as a general guideline, when you are training and racing, you should be aiming to get about 250 to 400 calories per hour. All right. If you are training aerobically, you are probably burning 600-ish calories per hour. So you are always running a deficit when you're there, which is the bathtub emptying out. you should be aiming to get between 60 and 90 grams of carbohydrates or sugar into your body when you're doing these training sessions. Okay, so you can go look at the labels of what you have and you can determine what kind of works. Generally speaking, you will find a gel is around about 100 calories. Okay, so that means that, look, you would need sort of 3 gels an hour. All right, if you're taking in sports drink as well, that's going to have a level of calories and associated carbohydrates as well. So start having a look at the products that you've got, figure out what you like taking, and start sticking to that very basic guideline. And you'll find that you will be able to sort of work your way to a basic nutrition strategy for training that is fairly simple and will start to work for you. The other thing that I would say is just how much liquid you need will depend on the weather. A little bit, it's 40 degrees, you're going to drink more. If it's cold, you're going to drink less. But generally speaking, most people here will be looking at 500 mils to 750. So a small drink bottle of water to a bigger drink bottle of water per hour when they're on the bike. Keep in mind that if you're putting sugary products or carbohydrates into your drinks, if you're not drinking the same amount per hour, your calories are differing depending on the temperature as well. So just keep that in mind. And I would always recommend people to use lower GI products, so products that take longer to process to begin with, and higher GI products later. So a lower GI product I would describe as real food. Okay, higher GI products are things like gels, jelly beans, cans of Coke, things where it's basically straight sugar going straight into the bloodstream. The reason I say that is, if all of you decided to take gels to get through a work day, by the end of the afternoon, you're going to feel pretty sick in the stomach from having that much sugar. I would always recommend that you take stuff that absorbs slower into the bloodstream. And then as you get to the point of really needing a sugar hit to keep going, that's when the can of degassed Coke and stuff like that works wonders when you're out there at a long distance event. All right. Before I move on from the nutrition stuff, does anyone have any questions? Everyone's got that nailed? All right. So first thing I will always get asked is this year is, will Western Sydney have a wetsuit? And the answer is probably, but it's not guaranteed. All right. So I will go through just some basic equipment that, everyone here is going to have different stuff. I'll just talk about benefits and cons of a couple of the bits of equipment when you go through there. Number one, in the swim, a wetsuit is always faster. Okay, I don't care who you are. It's always 99% of the time going to be the faster option for everyone here. Having Western Sydney 70.3 in May is an unusual time. I think you will get a wetsuit, but there's a small chance that you won't. But if you have the choice of taking one, definitely do when you're out there. Always make sure you've got new goggles for a race. Okay, so a set of goggles that you've only used, say, once. So if you have goggles that you like to use in training, go buy another set. Don't open them. Go open them the week before just to take tension on them, and go take them out there for race day to make sure that they don't fall. All right. A time trial bike is always faster. All right. So if you have the luxury of more than one bike, a time trial bike is faster. The Western Sydney course is relatively flat. A time trial bike is going to be faster for that course. When it comes to bikes being faster, always control the controllables. And one of the controllables is making sure you get your bike serviced in 2 to 3 weeks out from the event to identify any issues and have enough time to repair them. And I would always say, for most people, put new tires on. All right. So reduce the likelihood of getting a puncture. Even if your old tires are not ready to go, you can always put those tires back on afterwards and wear them down, but always try to use a relatively new set for race day. 1, your tires are faster. 2, less likely to get a puncture because they're not already damaged when they're out there. Running. I would always recommend that you don't use special shoes that you haven't trained in much in the lead up. So, if you've got special carbon plated shoes you want to wear, that's fine. Just make sure you use those for those special weekend sessions in the lead up so that you're used to using them. Don't buy new shoes that you haven't used before, a model that you haven't used before. Even if you buy a new set to use for race day, which I would recommend if you have the ability to do that, at least go do 20, 30 Ks in them before you take them on race day to make sure that they're worn in when you're there. The other big one is I would always recommend people wear socks for the bike and the run for long distance so that you don't get blisters when you're out there. So unless you're trying to be super fast and competitive and save 20 seconds up the front, I would always say that comfort trumps everything else, and something as simple as that goes through. For transition, if you haven't done transition at a half Ironman before, take your time. There's no need to rush. You're out there for a 5, 6, 7, 8 hour day. Okay, make sure you change into whatever makes you comfortable, whether that's socks and whatever. Make sure you pick everything that's nice and easy. Don't rush, because across a 7-hour day, 30 seconds doesn't make any real difference. I'd rather people were relaxed, calm, made sure they grabbed all their gear, didn't make any mistakes when they're out there. In terms of preparation for the event, you're obviously going to go do training in a pool and preparation. I think it's always a good thing to learn some open water skills before you go there. So learning how to draft, learning how to sight in the open water when you're out there, and then when you're actually out there on race day, just making sure you don't get caught up in racing it. As soon as you jump in, you just treat it like the warm-up, like you did at the local pool. You get into a rhythm, you focus on your technique. If you have the chance to draft or someone, you do, and you just work through the event slowly. We all know that if you pick up the pace dramatically in the water, it makes very little difference to your speed. So don't burn through all your energy, especially nervous energy in the swim. Just go out there, go swim 7 to 8 out of 10 of perceived effort. That's probably going to give you your best time. Realistically, the race and the time made and lost is on the bike and run, particularly on the run later in the day. All right, so when you get to the bike on race day, one thing to start preparing yourself for is the bike is the place that you treat as a buffet. So because your heart rate will be lower on the bike and it's easier to eat, you really try to eat as much as you can on the bike in preparation to fuel up for the run, where it is harder to eat because you're running. Your heart rate will get up when you're there. Okay. The critical thing for the bike is, ideal world, everyone would have power meters and heart rate zones and stuff to work with. Daily power meters is really learning to pace yourself from start to finish. So you cannot out-tough physiology. It's very mathematically based to get performances. If you do use power meters, I will give some basic guides. Okay, but basically, if you understand what threshold power is, if you think the bike is going to take over 3.5 hours, you really want to stay maybe 70 to 75%, which is quite aerobic. If you think it's going to take under 3 hours, so you think you're going to average, 30 kilometers an hour, a bit over, you can probably start pushing up into a tempo pace of about 80%. And if you are really quite advanced and up the pointy end of your age group, you can probably start pushing up to 85% even if you think you can be that quick. Generally speaking, as you go up in power output, your risk reward curve changes. So you need to make sure that you're going to burn through more sugar, you're going to burn through more energy. But if you do it faster, it's achievable. But if you're going to take longer times out there, the harder you go, the more you're going to set yourself up for having a difficult run when you're out there. And the last one that I'll talk about on the bike is just learning to actually have smooth power. Okay, so if you've got power targets to hold on a bike, you want to make sure that regardless of whether you're going uphill, downhill, flat, regardless of speed, you're pushing the same power output. So you might be climbing, you're pushing 200 watts. You might be on the flat, you're pushing 200 watts. Your speed's kind of irrelevant. You just want to make sure that your power stays as smooth as possible when you're out there. All right. On the run, tip number one is pace yourself for 21Ks. So for most people, I would say don't treat the run as 21.1Ks. Treat it as 11 aid stations. You should get an aid station about every 2 kilometers. So I would say you run out of transition and you aim to go run to the first aid station. All right, that's number one done. Okay, 1 of 11. And you're under the second one. All right, so you work yourself through that event, not by thinking, I've got 14 Ks to go. You start going, I've done 6 of 11. I've done 7 of 11. Like you just get there and you chip away very slowly. The goal for the run is you got to keep your heart rate down for the reasons that I said about energy systems. If your heart rate goes too high, you burn through too much sugar, you'll run out of energy. You need to keep it down. So for most people, I would say, look, you should definitely walk the aid stations unless you're trying to win an age group. So, and you should walk the aid stations purely just to be able to drink water as well and get it down. So even you see a lot of the pros just take a couple of steps of walking just to make sure they can actually swallow what they're doing, and then they'll get up and go to the next one. There's other people that you go out there and anytime your heart rate starts to hit the top of zone 2, you have to walk, right? And so you walk for 30 seconds, you'll find your heart rate at your fitness level will drop very quickly. As soon as you get down back into zone 2, you can start jogging again, okay? And you really have to regulate that heart rate staying down. And you might find at first, you can run 10 minutes at a time like that, and then it becomes 8, and then it just becomes, look, I run, a minute or 2 at a time, and I've got to take little 30-second walk breaks to get through. That's the best way to go about the event. But if it's your first time, don't think put your ego aside and say, hey, I'm walking every aid station. I'm going to walk that, 50 meters every, 2Ks. And then I'll tell you, when you get to kilometer 15, you can do whatever you want. But just get to a point where you realize you've got the legs and the energy to get through all the way to the end. All right. The other thing for the run is I would generally tell people that you should go for the really high sugary stuff towards the end. So that just goes straight into the bloodstream, burnt off straight away. So that's where things like the Coke and water becomes a really good strategy, which is ditch the gels, ditch the bars, ditch all this other stuff. Literally just have a cup of Coke, cup of water, bang, run to the next one. Just repeat that process until you get to the end of the race. Okay. All right. Mental preparation is a big part of it. All right. So it's really important for me that you might have a goal in the back of your head that I want to finish under a certain time. That's all lovely. You can have those goals, but having those goals don't change the way you have to go out and get them. Right. So you will get the best time that you can if you do the best process that you can. So when you're out there on race day, I would always say, you've got your process for what you're focusing on in the swim. So that might be, you're focusing on certain parts of your technique, or, you're just breaking it down, or you're trying to draft or whatever. You get onto the bike, you've got your power numbers or your heart rate numbers or wherever you want to follow it. And you just go, keep my heart rate here. Okay, don't worry about my speed. That's an external factor. It's windy, it's hot. You just focus on your heart rate. When you get to the run, you do the same thing. You've got your plan that, you think you can run about 6-minute Ks. So you go out there at your sensible speed, you run to the aid station, you walk a bit, you run to the next one. You keep following that process. That's going to give you your best time, okay? And then you'll get the time that you deserve. Hopefully it's under whatever goal you had, but don't focus on the outcome. Always focus on the process, because that's what gives you the outcome when you're out there. You don't focus on the finish line until you get there and you kind of see it, okay? The event's not easy, so don't think in your head that it's all going to be cruisy and it's easy. It's difficult. You get halfway through the run, it gets hard. That's why you're all there. That's why you all enjoy it. So when you get to that point of the race, you embrace that. You have a good smile at yourself because you chose to be there and paid to be there. Okay. And you enjoy the challenge that comes from finish off those events. Okay. The big one too is, when you're out there, it's a long day. So when you're in the swim, you don't think about what you can do on the run later on. Stay in the moment and, eat the elephant slowly. So when you're in the swim, you swim up, you swim across, you swim back, you go under the bridge. Just break it down. There's 4 or 5 distinct parts to the swim. So just in your head, there's part 1, part 2, part 3. You go on the bike, there's 2 laps out on the bike. So you can break that down into, 4 bits. Out and back, there's 2 bits. Then out and back again, there's 3 and 4. You get onto the run. I think it was 3 laps this year. I got to check that. I think it's 3 laps again this year. There's sort of 3 loops, and then you run around the lake to finish off. But same thing. You're just, okay, I'm out, I'm back. You can easily break that down into sort of 8 steps of different parts of the race. And, for me, it was always, look, just count the aid stations. It was much easier to process 11 aid stations than it was to process a city to surf and then another 7K run to finish it off when you're out there. The last one is learn to talk to yourself positively, which may sound silly sometimes. But when you're in these events, your body will always follow what you're telling it. So if you get out of the swim and you look at your watch and it's not the time that you wanted, don't say, I'm having a bad day, because then I guarantee you will have a bad day. You'll struggle on the bike as a result. You got to get out and think, I did a great swim. I'm on the bike. I feel good. When you're on the run, you got to tell yourself, I'm doing well. You're having a good day. You feel good. All right. Because your body language will reflect what you tell it. So I've seen plenty of athletes that, got out of the swim and had a slow swim time, and they didn't know that everyone had a slow swim time. It was just a bad day for swimming. The current was against everyone. Everyone's come out of the water doing it slowly. And so they've then let that affect the rest of their day, not knowing that they actually had a great swim time. Okay, so just always make sure that you keep yourself really positive in the race, because there'll be plenty of patches where, some family cheering for you, but there's plenty of patches where you're the only supporter for yourself, and you've got to stay really upbeat when you're out there. I've got a question. On the run fueling, does the Western Australia have Coke at the aid stations? We need to bring our own supplies. Yeah, so I haven't checked who the sponsors are. Last year it was Morton's. They will always have sports drink out on the course. They will typically have gels out on the course from the sponsor as well. Sometimes they will have degassed Coke out there as well. It depends on the event. If you go to, we will do another presentation a couple of weeks out, and I will find out all that information and talk about it in that presentation. But if you go to their the Ironman 70.3 Western Sydney page, it'll say exactly who the sponsors are. There will be a map on there which will say, hey, every aid station looks like this, and it'll say, you know, the first table has water, the second table has sports drink, the next one has Coke, and then the next one has chocolate bars of whatever. That they'll be very specific about what they have when they're out there. So you'll be able to find it. And the electrolytes they provide will always contain carbs in it because it's race day. So they're not going to give you stuff without that. But it'll all be very clearly marked and identified. And so I would also, on that note, you know, if you know who the supplier is for an event, go out and buy a bunch of their products and go try them in training. If you like them, great. You don't have to carry as much gear on race day. And if you don't like them, cool. Now you know you don't like them. Carry your own gear so that you don't have to use them on race day as well. All right. I give you some general tips for preparing over the next, 3 months. One is what I said before. There's no single day, week, or session that matters, right? It's consistency over time, right? So everyone wants this, magic training program or magic bullet, or hey, I did this one session and it really made a difference. It's consistency over time. So, people are going to get sick, people are going to have work and family and stuff get in the way. But as long as you're consistent, over a year, you might miss 5 of your long rides because of family stuff got in the way. But that's 5 over 52 weeks. You still got 92% completion rate, right? Which is great. So that will happen. The only thing I will say is try not to miss the same session all the time. So don't, always miss your long run, or don't always miss your long ride. That will make a difference. But if you miss the odd random thing, that's life. It's okay. Sometimes it's just, nature's way of making you have a break when you're out there. You will have disruptions. It's normal. Don't let it get to you. You all got 3 months straight. It's pretty common to get a cold or something. Every year we all get colds. You might not get it at a useful time, but just accept it, take a break, get back to what you're doing when you're out there. Don't expect race day to go perfectly. Something will not go well. It's just your planning and attitude towards it. You want to control as much as you can the lead up. So, little things, get your bike service, make sure you got all your gear. You can control heaps of things before race day. But then if you've sort of, worked all that out, then the chances of things going not right on race day just get minimized when you're out there. Focus on the process of training. Don't worry about what others are doing. Don't be too worried about the outcome. If you're training to the best of your ability, you will get what you deserve, and be happy with that when you're out there. So, unfortunately, I don't get to just decide that I want to be the 100-meter Olympic champion in sprint, and I can't go out there and do that. But I can go out there and train as best I can, and maybe I can be a fast runner. But you don't get to control the outcome. You just get to control what you put into what you're doing, and always be happy with that when you're out there. Concentrate on your training and others. Okay, if you're around triathlon, there's people who've done it for a long, long time, and there's people that do huge amounts of training, that they can apparently do, and you might look at it and think, I can't do that, and that's fine. Let them do it their way. You can do it your way. I've always been a bigger fan of lower volume and strength training and things like that, because I think it gets a better outcome. I think it's less likely to burn people out. I think it's less likely to get injured, and I think you get a better performance. But it does mean you're not going to train as much as other people. But other people will have a different approach to it. Just loads and loads of training. But you've got to work out what works for you, and you can only train. The right level of training is the amount that your body can adapt to. As soon as you go training more than that, you're not doing anything beneficial. You won't get better. You just will get tired, and your injury risk goes up in terms of what you're doing. So always just focus on you when you're out there. All right. So getting towards the end of the presentation. So I'm happy to take any questions from anyone. So a lot of what I've spoken about today is just from my experience coaching over the last sort of 15 years for people and events, and hopefully I've passed on some information that's really good for people to put in their own stuff. We have training programs. I do coach people individually if anyone wants help, and we have a nutritionist here that can give guidance if you need help with either your race day nutrition, or you need help for your outside and just your training nutrition. Then we do bike fitting and strength training and everything. So if anyone's got any questions about that, feel free to contact me. I will send this video to everyone in the next day or two, so you can all watch it again and rewind it to the bits that were useful, and you'll have my direct contact if you want to contact me and ask any questions as well. I'm quite happy to answer questions on anything. That's all fine as well. So I guess after saying all that, Does anyone have any questions about what I covered or anything that I didn't cover that they'd like me to help them? Jeff, you've done how many Ironmans?
I've done 4.
Or have
And
you?
so, yeah, I've been racing for like, I don't know, 30 odd years, and
Yep.
and I'm still learning. And I still cock up, and I still do mistakes.
And you'd
Yeah.
also come from the era where there would have been an era of just massive volume in there at one point.
Yeah, it was all trial and error.
Yeah, it's changed over the years. But, when I say things like, only focus on what you do, there would have been plenty of times where you saw the amount of training and stuff with people around you, and it sort of creates doubts in your own head about what you're doing. But you do have to get to a point where you just trust in yourself and what you're doing.
No, for sure. And I think the benefit was, you think that the thing you said, ego. So definitely park that.
Yep.
And I've had to learn to really eat. I wasn't having enough protein. So there's so much stuff I had to learn, and that's from someone's racing 30 years.
Yep.
So yeah, for the guys that are on the session, really highly recommend Dan and the team. And I jumped on here, right, because I said, like, well, I'd like to see if there's anything else new I could pick up, and I might do one in May, because I'm thinking, I've got a bit of form, so
Yep.
Hey, don't want to waste it.
Jump off the back of Worlds last year. Yep.
Yeah. So so I think I'll come off in like Husky, and I'll go, that's in March.
Yep.
And I'm really happy about the training you just showed me. I was expecting really big training as well, because that's what we did back in the good old days, because we didn't know any better.
My attitude towards training is always, quality training rather than volume. And so, when it comes to if you're always tired from training, then the next session is not that good of quality, because you're only training as hard as your tired body can go, right? And so you would have done it where, you've done massive Ks on the bike or run, and you show up to swimming and you can't even hold a basic speed because your legs are so stiff and sore. And then I look at that and go, well, what's the point, right? And the same goes for, if you want to go do a track running session or some high quality session, and you've done 180 Ks on the bike before, and so you get out there and you're running 30 seconds a K slower than what you can do, I see no quality in that, and go, well, the limit of what you're pushing is just your fatigue factor, which there's no benefit, right? If I look at it from a biochemistry basis, I go, well, you're not pushing the muscles, because that was the point of the session. You're not pushing the energy system properly because you're too burnt out. You can't even get your heart rate up to that level because you're too fatigued. So my attitude is, you have to do it at the level that is appropriate for you. Having said that, there's lots of really high-end quality athletes that can train at that level effectively. But everyone on here today, I assume, has a job and kids and family and everything else, which just means that you've got to find that right level for you to train at and where you're up to. And keep in mind too, your athlete experience adds up as well. So say, Jeff, how old are you now? You're in your 50s, aren't you?
52.
52. So, but you've got 20, 30 years of experience, right? So I wouldn't say, you are completely different as an athlete to someone who picked up triathlon last year in their 50s, right? So your ability to go out there and train is far better, because you've done all these Ironmans, you've done this stuff in the past, your body knows or remembers to some extent how to do it. So your athletic age is different to someone that just started the sport, where I know one or two on here, I think, of people that have done bike fit before, and they are new to the whole thing. So, Jeff might be 52. There might be other people here that are 25, but Jeff can actually train much more volume than you guys, just because of his training history. That's what he did. So, when I started the sport and I was, 24 or something like that, training once a day was really tiring. And then by the time, I was doing Ironman and stuff like that, it's just normal. I got up in the morning, I trained, I go to work, I train again after work, I get up again, and it was fine because I was used to that training volume. But it didn't start like that. You started with what you could cope with. And then you tacked on it over time. And then, even, Jeff talks about learning. I'm still learning as well. So, you learn over time how to manage your own body, but you also learn when new information comes out. Recovery has changed dramatically in the last decade, with what works and what doesn't work. But learning, okay, if I add these things, I can train a bit harder, or I can train and then I recover and I can get up the next day and I can train better the day after. It's sort of learning to use all those things as well. And Luke, have you got any questions? Are you going to dive into Western Sydney? Wait, you got no sound, buddy?
Hello, I'm here. No, I'm not going to dive into Western Sydney because I am going to listen to my body and not injure myself.
Good man.
But
I'll chip away at you for the year after.
yeah, no, I definitely want to do one. Yeah, this is just not the year, but yeah, I've been doing a lot of
the year after you're bike riding and you're running, but we got to get you back in the pool properly. So
Yeah, I'll get in the pool.
I'll get you there.
Splash.
Right. Has anyone else got any questions? Hannah, have you got any questions?
No, I'm quite happy with what I've heard.
Okay, that's good. Has anyone else got any questions?
And I think Dan also too, like you forget, like also too, make sure you guys have fun too.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have lasted 30s if I didn't have fun and enjoy it. It's not life and death. It's you versus you. As Dan said, you're trying to better yourself. So have fun along the way.
Yeah, excellent. All right.
Yeah.
I will send a copy of this to everyone in the next day or so. We will run another presentation, I think about 2-3 weeks out, and I'll talk much more about just how to actually do the race on the day. So today was just spoke about in general the training. I've glossed on a couple of things in terms of pacing and stuff, but the one that I do to 3 race out, I'll be very specific about how to approach the swim, the